Mela Nurmi was born in Massachusetts in 1922, soon moving to Astoria, Oregon with her Finnish immigrant parents, where for a time she worked in tuna and salmon canneries in her youth. Despite these rather humble beginnings, she would go on to lead an amazing life, even before hitting it big and briefly becoming incredibly famous at 32 years old. When she was 18, she relocated to LA to pursue stardom, and according to her diaries, discovered by her niece after her death in 2008, Nurmi quickly met and fell for Orson Welles, who took her virginity and impregnated her, though she was forced to keep this a secret and give the baby up for adoption due to his engagement with Rita Hayworth. Even after Welles abandoned Nurmi, she continued to pursue her dreams. She appeared in some Broadway shows and movies, but primarily thrived as a pinup model for men's magazines, thanks to her striking good looks and almost baffling 38, 17, 36 hourglass measurements. During this time, she also struck up a friendship and on-again, off-again romance with Marlon Brando. Nurmi's life would really change in 1954, when she attended an LA masquerade ball with her then-husband, film and TV writer Dean Reisner. Nurmi came in costume as the yet unnamed Morticia Addams from Charles Addams' series of Addams Family cartoons in The New Yorker. A local TV producer saw Nurmi at the party and decided her look was perfect for an idea he had recently developed: hosted horror films on late-night TV. And so the character of Vampira was born, and the Vampira show debuted at midnight on May 1st, 1954 on LA's KABC. As Vampira, Nurmi made history as the first ever horror movie hostess, and the immediately successful show, driven by Nurmi's spooky but beautiful appearance and her pitch-black wit, made her an instant star. Nurmi adopted the goth look of Vampira as her now almost 24/7 appearance, and during her time as the character, not only had a brief fling with Elvis Presley in Las Vegas, but more significantly struck up an unexpected but briefly intense friendship with a death and occult-obsessed young star on the rise, James Dean. For a time, Nurmi, Dean, and fellow acquaintance Jack Simmons would dub themselves the Midnight Watch, and drive around the late-night streets of LA in a converted Cadillac hearse. But when Dean's star began to take off, he abruptly ended the friendship, and became dismissive of Vampira in press interviews, a move Nurmi and others in the know have claimed was more of a PR and advisor-enforced decision than a reflection of his true feelings. Unfortunately for Nurmi, just like her friendship with Dean, the reign of Vampira as a popular LA TV personality was also short-lived. In 1955, only 1 year after the Vampira show had debuted, Nurmi refused to sell the full rights of the character to ABC, and they canceled the show. She briefly resurrected it on a different LA network, but this version didn't last long either. By the time she appeared in Ed Wood's infamous Plan 9 from Outer Space in 1957, dressed in her costume and billed as Vampira, her star and status had fallen enough that she was paid only $200 for the role, and was quite thankful to receive it. Ironically, the Plan 9 role would become her most endearing pop cultural impact as Vampira, as most footage from the Vampira show was not saved and has been lost to time. Nurmi ultimately opened a popular antiques boutique called Vampira's Attic on Melrose Avenue in the early 60s. In her later years, failing health, at least partly caused by the extreme diet and exercise she underwent to keep those almost inhuman measurements, and an admittedly sometimes harsh, antagonistic attitude about business affairs, left Nurmi slightly reclusive, even as the Vampira character was rediscovered and made into an icon by a new generation of punk rockers and horror-obsessed fans. Unfortunately for Nurmi, the one closest opportunity she had of truly making a comeback as the character, when she was asked to revive Vampira in 1981 for LA TV, saw her fired from the project over creative differences, and producers instead moved forward with a new horror hostess, one whom Nurmi would eventually sue for copyright infringement, though she would lose the case. It must have stung just a little bit extra for Nurmi that the young starlet in question was quite like her in many ways, even leading a similarly starstruck life even before taking on the horror hostess character, but then finding a level of fame as her character that would arguably far eclipse Nurmi's legacy as Vampira, including eventually her own movie that, unlike Nurmi's brief turn in Plan 9, would see this new character as the titular star of her film. The year is 1988, and New World Pictures and NBC Productions are ready to bring a popular TV horror hostess turned pop culture icon to the big screen, and in the process hopefully launch the next big horror comedy franchise with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, ready to bust through your speakers with one of my best friends.
That's right. You know, we may be done talking about DOA Dead or Alive, but that don't mean we're done talking about jiggle physics, my friend. We're right back in that territory as we start a new series, and I believe one of our favorite series. I always really looking forward to this. You know, it's always obviously a little scary, not because we're watching such a spooky movie, but I mean, just in general, when we do this series, we don't know exactly what we're going to end up watching, and it's it can be a mixed bag, and I think what we have for the next few episodes definitely I would call a mixed bag.
Maybe our most mixed bag of each annual test of our strength, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like this is what this podcast was made for, honestly. You know, to see like the real, like really get into the mud about these kind of things, you know, which we will be doing with some of these movies.
Yeah.
But that is the start of Summer Surprise, where we have allowed an online randomizer to choose our next few episodes from our long document of failed movie franchise starters. Because you know we've got plenty that we've been able to slide into series. We've got plenty that we want to do for whatever particular reason at some point in the year, and then there are others where we're just like, I don't know, we'll get to it at some point. Or there's ones we're just trying to avoid, or whatever the case might be, right? But we let this online randomizer choose it, and it has chosen. I would say
it threw you off, and you're almost in a state of denial. That's
my own like inability to speak threw me off. Yeah, that's good. That's how, you know, looking at this list of movies, I was reminded, ooh, what a weird grab bag it is. But we are starting with a doozy, I think, and obviously, you know, I'll have more to say about that as we go over it, as I'm sure you will too. But this episode, our first entry in Summer Surprise is 1988's Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
For sure. 1988, the greatest year of all time, the year that I was born. Yeah. I was born that year. Okay. Okay. Directed by James Signorelli, an Italian as well. So there you go. He is a famed...
Yeah, James Signorelli. That's probably how you should say it.
And we like and subscribe. Anyway. Okay, he's famed SNL producer, director. He's been with the show from 1973 to 2020.
Yeah, he's directed like a lot of the commercial parodies. That's
big
kind of
time.
That was like his big bread and butter there. Yeah.
And then I also see that he directed Police Academy 2. Yeah. So I have that there too.
One of the better Police Academy movies. Take it from someone who watched the entire Police Academy series over the course of 2 days a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Number 2, one of the better ones.
Yeah, you're a psycho.
Take that for what it's worth.
Okay, this one, Elvira, is written by Sam Egan. He is a famed, or maybe not famed, but acclaimed TV writer, producer. John Paragon, writer for Elvira and Pee-wee, and one Cassandra Peterson.
Who's that?
Elvira herself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whatever, like this far, and I hadn't figured that out.
I would say look up at the poster above your bed. That's her.
Well, if you're talking about my childhood bedroom, you ain't wrong, buddy.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay, the budget of this film, $7.5 million. This is where it didn't make a lot of money.
No.
Worldwide, 5.6.
Yep.
There's a little bit of reasons to that, which we'll get into maybe about the movie itself, but in general, a big part of it was a business issue. The distribution company for the film went out of business like the same week of the release. Yeah. So the theaters dropped from 2,500 showings across America to roughly 500. So, I mean, I guess 5.6 million for 500 theaters isn't terrible. Maybe. Back in 1988?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean,
sure.
Obviously the expectations were higher, especially for as big of a phenomenon as the character was at that point, which I know we'll get into. So I just think it was definitely a matter of, I mean, you're not making back your budget, obviously, first of all. You're not, let alone doubling it. And then, I think there was definitely higher... Well, double plus whatever, but there was definitely higher expectations on this. But I'll tell you what, of the, only 500 theaters, at least one of those was in my hometown growing up, because I certainly saw this in the theater as a wee 8-year-old. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a good place to start, because I'll just say right off the bat, I obviously know Elvira. Not personally.
Who
but
doesn't?
I know,
right?
like exactly. Like Elvira is just in the cultural ether at every age, I think. Maybe not Gen, Z and Alpha, but, late stage millennials and before, for sure. The television program she hosted, Movie Macabre, 1981 to 1986. But she was like the peak. When this movie came out in 1988, it was peak Elvira. And not to say that she's gone anywhere, because she's been in pop culture, like I said, all the way up to really 2022. That's the last credit. The Munsters, unfortunately.
That's just her last credit, as like her last time. That was she's in that, but not as Elvira.
Yeah, of course.
Her last time in the Elvira costume was unfortunately. This is like so hard for me to wrap my head around, because you always think like, oh, what's going to be her big swan song as Elvira? It was an episode of The Goldbergs. It was after that where she was like, yeah, I think I'm done. Not because of being the Goldbergs. It was just, I think she did that, and then I think she just had this realization like afterwards where she's like, I don't know if I'm going to put this costume on again. So,
was that the reason Jeff, whatever his name was, fired?
I hope he wasn't on the set with her in that costume.
Yeah, exactly. Allegedly,
could have come up with that. Allegedly. Yeah.
And we don't like making fun of actors, so we don't know. But yeah, Elvira, a mainstay in pop culture. Can I just, before I go to my question and throw it to you, just for the listeners, I want to rattle off just a few things in the recent years where she just kind of pops up as the character, okay? Because these are like odd ones, I would say. She popped up in...
Popped out.
There you go. By the way, that was my double joke.
I know.
That you didn't catch on. Okay. She was in the Call of Duty Infinite Warfare game, by the way, in one of the DLCs. She's been on RuPaul's Drag Race. I guess that's not really, out of the ordinary for where she is at this time and who she is. The Boneyard Collection. I don't even know what this is. What is this? Pain, a video game. A lot of video. She's done a lot of voice work in the last recent years, but tons of just cameos.
Yeah. Elvira, the Elvira character has become like a kind of a recurring character in those like Scooby-Doo movies.
Yes,
the animated movies. Yeah,
like she's built. I said 1981 to 86, built. Right?
Yep, that's true.
80. You know what? I'm gonna have to mop this episode up.
It's in the spirit of her own humor.
100%.
Yeah.
So 1981 to 86, the show's only on for 5 years, right? But she has built this empire, and ownership of the character too. So like, it's pretty incredible what she's done and where she came from to take a 5-year job, 5-year gig, getting paid $300 an episode. I read there at the beginning of the show, to where she is now, and just like a complete horror icon. That keeps on working. So with that being said, I want to throw it to you, and I think that maybe the listeners already caught on, but Trev, how big of a fan of Elvira are you?
No, I mean, I would a huge Elvira fan, and I think you already knew that before we got to this episode. Yeah. I mean, I think you knew this was a movie I was really eagerly anticipating us getting to do one day. So I was obviously very excited when it got pulled in Summer Surprise. Speaking of things getting pulled, talking about me watching it. No, just kidding. I have been a huge Elvira fan since I was a kid. My dad was an Elvira fan as well, and he got me into the character. And like I said, one of
you wish you were in the character.
Obviously, my dad is the one who took me to see the movie in '88. That might have been. This is where it gets tricky for me to remember. That might have been my introduction to the character. Maybe not. Maybe I'd already seen her on TV, here and there. I certainly wasn't watching Movie Macabre when I was younger. I'm not even sure if it ended up being on in Detroit, because it was like a regional LA show for a while, and then it did get syndicated nationally eventually. But I don't know. I never saw it as a kid. I saw it later in resurrections of it and things like that. And I've certainly got DVDs of Movie Macabre episodes, but I wasn't watching it live. But she was also on a lot of commercials. If you went to a liquor store or just a grocery store during the 80s, you probably saw the Elvira Coors Light cardboard stand-ups, which I kick myself, because I just think back to that period of the 80s. If I had been smart, I would have just asked one of those stores, hey, can I just have this when you're done? Because they were just throwing those out, I'm sure. They didn't care, And now if you find
maybe not that one.
Well, maybe not true. Yeah, but because those are huge collector's items now. They go for so much.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot for me to talk about here, and obviously I want to keep it brief. But before I even talk about the Elvira part of it, I should just say I'm also just a huge fan of the concept of horror hosts, and that's just something I've always been kind of obsessed with. And I did want to quickly ask you, because when you talk about horror hosts, it's kind of like understood that that's primarily like an American phenomenon, the horror hosts. But I did look it up, and I did see that Canada has had a couple. Gene Taylor and Art Nefsky hosted City TV's Monsters We Know and Love in Toronto in the 70s. So there has been like a few, But
right.
I just wonder, just the idea of like horror hosts, was that anything that you were kind of cognizant of growing up, or is it something you've like kind of come back around to, or that you're interested in, or just because I could even talk about the history of that. Again, I don't want to make this a 4-hour episode, but
sure.
Just curious, like how much did that even get into you? Or you said like obviously everyone knows Elvira, but what about just the idea of a horror host?
My first introduction to horror hosts, if I'm just serving off my memory right now, is the character in Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
Fred.
What?
Well, we got some problems up here. The monitor's Fritz. Do the Renfield bit.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Tonight's movie is a horror classic from Grandpa Fred's special horror movie archive. Come on, Renfield. Give me that pen. Renfield is always loath to give up good material. Oh, now this is a scary movie. Igor? Scary. That's right. It's really scary.
That's my introduction to the concept. Because when Gremlins 2 is what year? Do you know roughly off the top of your head without looking? Mid.
Oh, I don't. I want to say
late 80s then, right?
Yeah, or 90 maybe even. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like that would make sense then, because it would be past Elvira's time technically. And then I was just growing up. So that was my first my first introduction to that stuff. And then I know of Svengoolie. I know that through another podcast I listened to, and I've heard him actually guest on that podcast a few times. So like I know of those three: a fake one, Svengoolie, an East Coast, like New Jersey based, right? I believe, and then
Svengoolie Chicago based.
Oh, Chicago based.
Yeah, and
then Elvira. So. I know about them. I know the idea of them. I totally get it, quote unquote. I have never really interacted as much, even in my later years. Like even now, like it's never been something I go back to. It's funny because in my later years, I do enjoy the idea of like watching a movie and like commenting on it. Like during or after, you know what I mean? Like in the vein of that Mystery Science Theater, which I know I don't really watch, but I know of, and there's certain things like Red Letter Media we talk about a lot that I'm just very into that. I know it's a different brand of interaction with the film you're watching, but there's like a certain wit and a certain entertainer vibe you need to kind of keep these programs going. So I totally get it. I was just kind of past it, like I said earlier, I was born in 88. It's after that, it wasn't as many,
no, it was dying off by the late 80s. And I mean, it's like, that's, we often talk about like how things were better back in the day, right? Those were the days, and like all the things we've lost, right? And how I get like, so like kind of depressed when I think of how we've lost like video store culture and even like the pre-internet days of having to like actually do the work to find stuff out. And like horror hosts, and especially like the idea of like regional horror hosts, is definitely one of those things that I kind of bemoan that we've lost. There's still some people keeping it going. Obviously, Joe Bob Briggs. I'm guessing that's another one just from osmosis from talking to me. You know, but he's still got his show going on Shudder. And then there are some horror hosts that still plug along on YouTube. They just kind of all use the same like 10 public domain movies over and over. So there's people trying to keep the spirit alive. But I love the idea. For those who don't, I can just briefly explain this. Like especially like starting in the 50s and then especially into the 60s. Like the Universal the old Universal monster movies were sold to all these different regional markets as a package called like Shock Theater. And all these different networks would put them on, either like late Saturday night or maybe Saturday afternoon. But they decided they wanted to like spruce it up a little bit. They're like, well, if we're going to have people watch Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all these, we should have someone like host it. And so it was often like the weatherman for the network or something, or, somebody who already worked at the network. They would just kind of create this character who would kind of pop in before and after the commercial breaks. And, it's like usually this like, funny, spooky character. So some kind of like vampire or ghoul, but somebody who would like kind of make fun of the movie as it went along or tell you a lot about the movie. And that's where, I think I've brought up Joe Bob Briggs before on the show and how important he was to me as just a film fan, because his whole hosting, expertise is coming in and telling you a lot of trivia about the movies. And especially in the pre-internet era, that was really, really important. That's how I found out a lot about a lot of the slashers and horror films I love, was watching Monster Vision and him telling you like the cast's filmography and what the behind the scenes stories. Elvira is obviously kind of more in the traditional mode a little bit of like, being a little more like funny, and especially what made her so famous is she really like just revolutionized the game. I mean, if you want me to go into like the little Elvira like history lesson now that we've got out of the way that I am a fan, I can just kind of quickly explain this. First of all, before we even get into Elvira, there you go. I just want to.
I will say, it is for listeners, this is in the vein of her.
That's right.
Too.
If you think we're being gross, then you haven't seen Elvira. You don't know like her sense of humor. We're trying to like ape that a little bit. Probably not, and we're not doing nearly as good of a job. But,
not at all.
Hello, darling. It's me again, yours truly, Elvira, the gal with the enormous ratings. And until then, this is Elvira, the gal who put the boob back in the boob tube, saying, unpleasant dreams.
I just want to like also just shout out like Cassandra Peterson and like her story, because I know you did some research, into her. Like, obviously I know a lot of this already. I've read her autobiography, read multiple interviews, seen the documentaries and everything.
Yeah, watched her from outside her house
with my binoculars, and I'm sure that you were kind of taken aback by her life story, even like pre-Elvira, because it's really one of those like, oh, I guess people like Forrest Gump do exist, like
totally, and like Can I just throw a couple at you? Like just little things that she's gone through in her life, like, like she became a Vegas showgirl at 17 years old.
And to get permission from her parents.
Yeah, I love this.
A document saying that she could be a showgirl at 17.
Yeah, and I love this this quote too. I wasn't able to enter the hotel except through the back through the kitchen. I couldn't drink or gamble or go into the casino, but I could dance in a G-string on stage. Yep. I thought that was great.
Vegas.
And she was an extra in a James Bond movie, Diamonds Are Forever. She's uncredited in there. She once went on a sort of date with Elvis Presley when she was 17. Classic Presley, allegedly. And, got career advice.
Yeah, very important date. Because she says like it was a very actually innocent date. Nothing happened between the two of them.
No.
But he did tell her like, what are you doing here in Vegas? You're 17. You should actually like pursue something else. I've heard you sing. You should pursue singing. And so she's like, okay. But then how did she pursue singing? She just kind of packed up everything and flew to like Rome and became a singer of like a punk band there. And while she was there as a singer in a punk band in Italy, she just gets spotted by Federico Fellini, who's like, "Hey, you look like you." I'm not gonna keep doing the Italian accents, but he's like, "You look like my wife. I think you look like my. I think it looks like his deceased wife or something." He's like, "You look like my wife. Do you want to be in one of my movies?" So she's also in Roma.
And then also she, the intro to Thriller with Vincent Price. The great
the rap,
that was originally written for Elvira to be done, but what was it? Quincy Jones had a personal connection to Vincent Price, but like Cassandra Peterson's like all over the place,
Yeah, and she lost her virginity. Did you see who she lost her virginity to? Tom Jones, star of Mars Attacks.
Hey, a Tim Burton connection, which we'll get to, I guess soon too.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think as more of that has become public knowledge, in more recent years, as she's really started to separate Cassandra Peterson from Elvira more.
Definitely.
It's just been so fascinating to learn more and more about her, and especially to read the autobiography she published a few years ago, Cruelly Yours, because we're just kind of touching like the surface here. There's just so many like celebrities and so many wild things that happened to her even before she was Elvira, which is kind of hard to wrap your brain around, because this is obviously going to be like kind of part of the discussion we're having. Is even me as a huge fan, I knew that Cassandra Peterson was Elvira, right? But I spent the first few decades of my life just thinking of her as Elvira. She is one of those, like, this is a real kind of like 80s kind of thing, right? These characters who just became so big that they eclipse like the persona behind them.
Yeah.
And these people who just like lock into being like, I'm just going to be this character essentially. And you said she built an empire on that, and that's very telling. But she's like obviously reminiscent of, one of her good friends, and I'll talk about that, Paul Rubens. But obviously everyone knows him as Pee-wee, and for like a long time, just no one really knew that Paul Rubens was Pee-wee. They just thought of Pee-wee Herman. And then I even think of like Jim Varney and Ernest, another kind of 80s icon, to a degree in that vein.
Are those three like the ones?
Those are the big three I think of.
Yeah, I'm even trying to think of one right now, and I don't know of one that just is quintessentially their fictional character throughout the majority of their career. So much, like, for better or for worse too. Like, you either own it as much as possible, which I think Cassandra Peterson has done until recent years, but those three characters like really took over their lives like completely, like, and I'm not really sure who else.
In my head, I always lump the three of them together because, like I said, they're all kind of from the same time period, and they all fit in. And there's a direct connection between two of them, Elvira and Pee-wee. But
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, because I'm curious now. Is it because of the time? Like, if it's the 80s and the early 90s, let's just say, right? Like a good 15-year period there. Is it because we just did not have the access that we do now to celebrity, that because we don't see, we see so much paparazzi, we see so much Instagram, we know celebrities inside and out. Is that the reason why this is kind of like not a thing anymore? That somebody is quintessentially their fictional character, and it's hard to separate from the public consciousness. Like, do you think that has something to do with it? That it was like literally the perfect fucking time in history that those three, especially Elvira, or Cassandra Peterson. See, I keep saying Elvira, but like those three, this was the time to do it. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's definitely a big part of it. I think you're onto something there. Is that there's no way, if these characters debuted today, there's no way they'd be able to have the same separation of themselves and their public persona. Like, everyone would know who they were, and there would be so many like listicles and like online things about like, well, here's the person behind the character, and people trying to figure it out, and people like wanting to like kind of take it down a notch by showing like what the reality is behind it. And I think people, it's maybe not even that people like didn't care to know that in the past. It's just that, as you said, it was so much easier to like not have that stuff be public knowledge because we didn't have the internet. The media sphere was like a little different. I just always put those three characters together in my head because I felt like they were like fulfilling a certain niche that it seemed like people were really kind of looking for in the 80s, and that was this idea of like these comedic characters that could be plugged into multiple things. And I always said like the honestly, this is going to be weird, and I hate to bring it up now considering recent news events, but like to me like the most like current like antecedent to that is Medea, right? The idea of like, oh well, Tyler Perry is the Medea character. There's a lot of Medea movies, but it's just kind of plugging Medea into different plots, right? And different supporting characters all the time. But that's kind of what was happening with like Ernest, Pee-wee, and Elvira, right? And like they all came from different backgrounds too. So Pee-wee was a character created just as part of like his stage show, his work in the Groundlings. Kind of that's where Elvira comes from too. I'll speak in just a second. I'll give like the really really quick abbreviated version of her history. But but obviously the Elvira character is created for the horror hosting, and then Ernest is created for commercials. He was a TV commercial pitchman.
Hey, Burner, look what I found in my daddy's closet. I bet you this is from the big one. WW2. Boy, I bet them were some great times. I know, because I never miss Hogan's Heroes on WDBJ7. With Schultz and Hogan and Commandant Clint. Hogan's Heroes. Weekdays on your hometown station. Vern, this must be some kind of a cigarette lighter. I know nothing. I see nothing.
And like you just think of how wild that is.
Yeah,
Like he just did like regional commercials, and people loved him so much that then the commercials went national, and then the country stood up en masse and was like, this guy is too funny to just be in like Mountain Dew commercials.
You need to be scared
Disney.
stupid.
You need to give him like a 4-movie contract. You know, that would be like if like Flo, the insurance lady, had movies now. You know,
Yeah.
That's just like what a wild time.
That's
and
crazy.
even then like Elvira, right? Like I'm saying, like Elvira just hosts. You know, she's just doing a horror host show, which has been done for decades before her. But then everyone's like, she should have her own sitcom. She should have her own movies. And like with Pee Wee, right? Pee Wee's just like a stage performance, but people say like, this stage show is so good, it's so popular in LA. He needs to be given a movie. We'll give him a TV. We'll give him a kids TV show. It's just kind of that's wild. And like again, that's like another era I kind of miss. I miss those kind of just comedic characters. I often think about that with Adam Sandler, where you think about how he did all these movies in a row, right? At the beginning, where he's like, I'm Billy Madison now. I'm Happy Gilmore. I'm the Water Boy. But it's like, why didn't he just like kind of create like one character and like run with that character through like multiple kinds of movies? That might have been fun, you know. But it's just not the thing anymore, really.
Totally.
And yeah, and I mentioned that I would give like just the kind of quick history. So just to kind of like set the table a little bit more for like where the Elvira part of it comes from. So as you said, Cassandra Peterson, you know, as a young woman, she's already had this kind of incredible life. But after her like the whole singing gig and like, you know, being in the punk band for a while, appearing in the Fellini movie, she kind of comes back to the States and she's like, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And, you know, she knows she's funny. People have always told her she's funny. So she decides to join the Groundlings, which is a like really, really famous, you know, improv comedy troupe in LA. And so she joins the Groundlings and gets like, you know, kind of comedic training. And the big part of the Groundlings is kind of creating these characters. And they'll do Groundling shows and everyone has
remember,
different characters they play.
just for our audiences that don't exactly know, some heavy hitters that have been part of the Groundlings. Phil Hartman, Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Will Ferrell, Lisa Kudrow. Like, these are some major players that came from there and got their huge breaks in SNL and sketch comedy. And exactly what Trev's getting at is creating characters and going with it.
And in particular, like her class of the Groundlings, like her and the little group of friends she assembles, like the Quattro, right?
Yeah.
Is Cassandra Peterson, Paul Rubens, Phil Hartman, and then John Paragon, who you mentioned earlier. And the four of them become inseparable in the Groundlings, and they all work together. They all write together. You know, like we you know, Phil Hartman was a co-writer of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Cassandra Peterson is actually in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. She's the biker queen in the biker bar scene. As you said, John Paragon goes on to become like Elvira's like main kind of writer for her material, but he's also Jambi the genie on Pee-wee's Playhouse. So these four, you know, are just like kind of this little group. And while she's in the Groundlings, she decides to answer this audition for a new horror hosting show. So this LA network decides they want to bring back Vampira, the classic horror host of the 50s. And they're going to do like the daughter of Vampira. And they contact the original Vampira. She's involved for a while, but she pushes a certain actress that they don't really want, and so they kind of dump her. Right. And then they bring in, and then they're like auditioning different people. And I think everybody came in trying to do the Vampira thing, like, ooh, spooky, you know, vampire woman, you know. And Cassandra Peterson, it's not because she wasn't interested in it. She's always said, since she was a small child, she did love classic horror movies. She was obsessed with horror. But I think she just had an idea like, you know what, I'm just going to go in and try something different. And she had been doing this Valley Girl character in the Groundlings. That was kind of her signature character. And she's like, you know, everyone is doing this like in the style of Vampira. What if I do it as the Valley Girl? What if I'm a Valley Girl horror host? Yeah. And that's what clicks, and they love it. And so the whole reason she's called Elvira is just because she was supposed to be called Vampira, but the actual Vampira like sued and said you can't use that name. So everyone in the room just wrote down different names, threw them into a coffee can. She pulled one out. It was Elvira, and then she was locked in, and she had the job. And I mean, you can just look at her and understand why the show kind of takes off, right? Yeah, like she decides to go for a very, very sexy look. You know, very, very low cut, you know, very front forward, we should say, high cut on the dress and everything. She's a beautiful one. But she also, because of this Valley Girl character, it was just something completely different than people were expecting or had seen in that kind of genre. Because not only is she kind of like making goofy jokes about the movies, but she's also making a lot of jokes about her boobs, you know, and a lot of jokes about her own kind of like her, you know, sexuality and just like, you know, her like sex in general. And so the character just like totally takes off. But yeah, it was just this idea of I'll just take this Valley Girl character and it's like a Valley Girl persona, but with the looks of a horror host.
Yeah, she calls Elvira just a big horn dog.
Yeah.
With like an incurable man chaser. So yeah, I guess for that late night crowd, a breath of fresh air.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. And there really is. I mean, you've alluded to it, but there's really no like. It's hard to like get across how big this character was, like in the 80s.
It is like I typically will gather some notes up and this and that and throw them in a PDF and send them to Trev and make sure that it all looks good. And I think we just kind of even scratched the surface. Like we haven't even scratched the surface for what she was, and continues to be with this character.
What she accomplished. Because like you said, earlier you weren't sure about like Generation Z or Alpha, like knowing about her. But I think they do, just because I've heard her say this. You know, she's talked about like not putting on the costume anymore and kind of retiring from Elvira. Sure. But as she's made the point, like it kind of almost doesn't matter because Elvira has become eternal, because she's just a constantly merchandised character. You still go into Spirit Halloween, you know, anytime like in the year when they're open, and tons of Elvira merchandise. As you said, she can appear in animated form, which she has done recently. She's basically said, and I think this is true. She I don't know, like, do you think this sounds too highfalutin? Cassandra Peterson has said, you know, Elvira has kind of become Halloween's Santa Claus. You know, like it's a character that's just entirely synonymous with Halloween. Halloween comes around and you start seeing Elvira pop up everywhere. So
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think. You know, this is funny too, because for her big beehive, but it doesn't even sound like she has a big head about it. It's just facts. No. You know, like Elvira, like you said, she said synonymous with the holiday, with spookiness. Not so much scary, but spooky. No. Right? Yeah. And a total mascot / champion of the genre. And oddly timeless. You know, like think of her look. And Trev just died thinking of the look. He just fell over.
Why am I not thinking of the look?
But like her look has stood the test of time throughout, like you're saying, generations and decades. And like when she pops up in animated things in the last few years, it's still the exact same look. You know what I mean? Like they're never trying to update Elvira. No. And there's so many, think of like superheroes, right? Like there's a new Superman coming out right away and they've updated his suit. You know, they're always updating some sort of there was like how many marks for the Iron Man costume? You know what I mean? Yeah. But Elvira, there's one look to her. And the reason I bring that up too, like, because I kind of need to name him Robert Redding. Yes. That was kind of the co-creator with Cassandra, like especially the look of her, her hairstyle, her dress, her plunging neckline.
They pitched a certain kind of look that the network turned down.
Oh, big time!
Because they wanted to go with she wanted to look like Sharon Tate in the Fearless Vampire Killers. So she wanted to be in this kind of like tattered pink dress and be a redhead and be covered in blood. And the network's like, nah, we want you to look more like Vampira. So she just went for like a much sexier version of Vampira, but like coming off of the Valley Girl thing and just like kind of like this idea of like 50s like suburban normality, but twisted, obviously, like you said, the big beehive, and then like putting like the knife on the belt and everything. So there's like this era of like dangerous sexuality to her, but then she immediately undercuts it by being so silly. It's just it's all really, really interesting, like how it's kind of put together. Yeah.
It's wild that it works. Like just to put it simply, it's wild. Like we'll get into the movie right away here, but you know, she's still sexy as hell with the dumbest haircut maybe imaginable. you know what I
think is wild about it too is because you said something that I really liked earlier when you said not scary but spooky. Yeah. And I think that's like a really, really important part of it, because she represents this like very approachable version of horror and Halloween. Yeah. You know, this idea is like, and that's the crazy thing is like, and I think this is something we'll talk about with this movie even. What I think is fascinating about her is you look at her and like how prominent the cleavage is, how much the jokes are all like sexual in nature and everything. And yet I've never not thought of Elvira as like a family-friendly character, you know? Like there's still something it still seems like so there's something so innocent about the humor of Elvira and the character in general that it's like she's approachable for like all audiences, and I think that's really helped her become this like icon that's crossed the barrier of just being a horror host too.
That is an incredible segue or just connection to talk about how good of a person she is. Okay, so I think what you're getting at is, she's this horror icon, but she's so approachable. And I think that's just because Cassandra Peterson exudes charm, wit, charisma, and like there's like a wholesome nature to her, even with her extreme sexiness. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have kids, but I would, like, if I was at these conventions during these, in the last few years and I brought my kids, like, there's no problem with me bringing them up to her. You know what I mean? Like, giving them a hug or something. Because she seems, again, doing the research, I am not as familiar up until the last week or so with Cassandra Peterson, the person. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, she sounds like what everybody should strive to be. Like, she is, an animal rights activist. She did a lot for AIDS related. What did she do here? She raised some money, right? She raised like $1.5 million during a telethon for AIDS because, unfortunately, Robert Redding, the guy who helped create the look, died from AIDS in '86. So it became a major cause for Cassandra Peterson. Safe sex. Like now recently
she was a very big outspoken like proponent and like advocate for the LGBTQ community, and that was before even coming out herself as
totally.
Queer in recent years. Yeah,
totally. Like she just seems so pure in a lot of ways, even though she was out with Elvis.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Losing her virginity to Tom Jones. Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to say that she's some like angelic force, but I guess socially and in a progressive way, she kind of really is what you should aspire to be. You know what I mean? Like I read here that she turned down $10,000 in 1990 to show up to some circus, and $10,000 to show up for like maybe like a wave, and she was like, "Fuck you." Yeah. You guys hurt these elephants.
Animals?
Yeah. No way. Yeah. She's done tons of work with PETA. She's just I obviously didn't read the memoir. I can't read, but you did, and I know the pages are stuck together. But from when your memories of her memoir, like what were you feeling when you were reading this? Like, were you filled with joy? Like, I'm not like,
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, my main takeaway from that book was just being blown away by her pre-Elvira life, which I did not know that much about, and just being like, oh my god, I just didn't, like I said, like I made the Forrest Gump joke, but it really was that, where you're so used to, like, you've lived your whole life with just knowing this person as this character, and then to go like, well, not only are you obviously you're not just that character, but just to find out the insanity of her life before that, and like, but I'll instead of talking about the biography, let me just tell you a very quick story, and I know you're gonna like make a joke about it, and you're going to try to make this gross, but to speak to the kind of person Cassandra Peterson is. So I have met her. I've only met her once. I met her at San Diego Comic-Con, actually. One of the first San Diego Comic-Cons I went to. She was in the autograph hall. And she did 2 days. She did 1 day signing autographs as Cassandra Peterson, and then she did 1 day in costume as Elvira. Well, guess which one I really wanted to go to, Yeah. And when, unfortunately, the day she was going to be Elvira, it didn't coincide with, there was like some kind of panel I really wanted to see or something, it was going to be like a Hall H day or something, and I couldn't make it to that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to go to the Cassandra Peterson day. And, look, I was like, I was a younger man back then. This is like over 10 years ago now. And I remember being disappointed about that, right? Having this idea like, oh, I'm going to finally meet Elvira, but she's not going to be Elvira. She's just Cassandra Peterson. But like you said, you get up to that table and you meet her, and there was just something so angelic about her, and just like she like instantly like puts you at ease, and she's just as, I mean, obviously she's just as funny as Cassandra Peterson. She's just as welcoming. It was just like you really felt like you were in the presence of like this like wholesome force. And like honestly, I met her as Cassandra Peterson, and it was amazing. It was great, and I was like, that was why did I even think otherwise? There was like no reason to. But yeah, I still cherish that, and obviously I have that picture, and she signed an Elvira 8x10 for me. But yeah, it was great, and it was like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to have like a photo op with her in the costume, but it really didn't even matter because Cassandra Peterson is the magic behind Elvira, which is something like that's become more obvious in more recent years, thankfully.
Totally, that's a cool story. I don't know, I don't think you've ever told me that story.
Yeah, and I'll definitely throw the picture of me meeting her up on our socials for people to see, including all the multitude of Elvira merchandise I have, so people can see the obsession you're alluding to.
Did you have bed sheets?
It's a lot. No, but you know what's cool though? It's like my wife also loves Elvira, so
nice.
she would totally be down with Elvira bed sheets, and she has not minded that I've populated the apartment with Elvira merch, because that's Elvira is like a hero and icon for her as well.
Cool. Love it. Okay. Before we get into the movie proper, I think we should just mention just how quickly this movie came to be, and
why it came to be.
Yeah, like. It came out in 1988. The show was out, like I said, it ended in 86. Obviously, she's just the height of her powers. The issue, though, is that it actually had a hard time getting off the ground, which is so interesting to me. That it started with NBC casting director Joel Thurm pitching the idea to the network president of a sitcom. And then Peterson was obviously okay with that, but thought, I've been living on TV all these years. I think we really it's my time to shine and bring the character to the big screen. So she really pushed for a movie. They did make a deal with NBC to produce a film, and then which was going to lead to sequels, which was going to eventually lead to that TV series. And as Trev said, she surrounds herself with people she worked with on the up and up, right, at the Groundlings. So she brings people in with the movie to make this thing. They look at Sam Egan, who's the experienced TV writer, to come onto the show or onto the movie because she lives in pop culture. Sam Egan wrote an episode of The Fall Guy. Speaking of a movie we might talk about one day. Starring Ryan Gosling. There was an episode called October the 31st, which he wrote explicitly for Cassandra. Yeah. So very happy with him. Brought him on to write the script with them. And they want Tim Burton. And the reason why is what Trev said before. She knows Paul Rubens. She cameoed in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And is like, oh man, Tim Burton's the guy to bring our vision to life. Oh, of course. Oh, yeah, 100%. Unfortunately, he's tied up making Beetlejuice. So they have to move on to a different guy, which is James Signorelli. Again, we're in the NBC family right now. So that makes total sense of why bringing why you get the guy who's been doing all the commercial parodies for the last fucking 11 years at this point. Yeah,
a steady hand NBC trusts. Yeah,
absolutely. And then you're off to the races with the movie. Funnily enough, she tried to get another horror icon into the film, Vincent Price, who we've already mentioned, and we keep talking about her sense of humor being so. I guess blue. Yeah. That what a loser. Vincent Price says no because it's no. You know what? I will say for this was come on. You know what? Don't be such a dork.
Okay, dork I'll take. Don't call my beloved Vincent Price one of my all-time favorite actors and human beings. Another just look into him someday. Amazing human being.
Okay, then I take back the loser, but don't be such a fucking square. Okay,
it is funny too because there's a really they did become outside of that they did become really good friends. Like Elvira has often talked about her friendship with Vincent Price, and there's a really fun video you can go watch of him. I don't know if it's his first time meeting her, but it's the two of them on the Tonight Show together. And he's so clearly smitten with her, you can just, as anybody would be, right? But he's this older man, and he's got Elvira in front of him, and he's just oh my, he's it's just, you can just tell he can't stop staring, and he's just in love with her. So the fact that he was the humor's a little too risque for me. That is a little. I mean, I agree that's a little unfortunate.
Yeah,
and
it is.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's too bad, but
yes. Okay, all right. Let me mop up the floor at Trev's place. Let me, check on his heart rate. But I think it's time to talk about the movie right after this trailer.
Wanna talk tough movies? Here's a superhero with the biggest pair of all.
You looking for me?
There she was, just walking down the street singing.
This Elvira is a slimy, slithering succubus, a concubine, a streetwalker, a tramp.
Yes, she's got it all. She's everything you've ever wanted in a movie. A woman and a casserole.
She was walking next to me.
see lots of weird romance.
What's that perfume you're wearing?
Super unleaded. Don't smoke.
Loads of drooling madness.
Ew, I hope you change the sheets.
Hey, Elvira, we got us a couple more volunteers.
Great! Just grab a tool and start banging.
A whole gang of awesome monsters.
I'm bad, Jamal, you know it.
And a few sleazy experiments.
And there's nothing wrong with G-rated movies as long as there's lots of sex and violence.
The charge is witchcraft.
We ought to have one of these every year.
See Elvira as Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Horror hostess Elvira quits her job after the station's new owner sexually harasses her. She plans to open an act in Las Vegas, but needs $50,000 for the project. Upon learning she is a beneficiary of her deceased great-aunt Morgana, she travels to the uptight town of Falwell, Massachusetts. Massachusetts?
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts? Massachusetts?
Massive two shits?
Massive two shits. I'm gonna keep that. To claim the inheritance, which turns out to be a dusty old mansion, a mischievous poodle, and a peculiar recipe book. Elvira's eccentric personality and revealing clothes turn the traditional neighborhood upside down, causing a revolt against her, except for the young people, who are eager to break free of their conservative chains. Meanwhile, Elvira's great uncle Vincent wants that recipe book for his own nefarious and mysterious evil plans. Why, you ask? Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. You know, sometimes you and I go back and forth on who should go first in their thoughts. And I'm just going to say, I'm just going to go first because I don't think there's any surprise here. I think anybody listening to the first half of this is probably going to guess that I'm a fan of this movie. As I said, I saw it in theater when I was 8, or maybe I was 7, depending on when it came out. But whatever. I saw it. I loved it then. I love it now. I've watched it many, many times. Right. And here's the thing. I don't know for sure. As usual, you and I haven't talked yet. And my assumption, here's where I get nervous, right? Because based on past episodes and based on what we talked about before and your idea that movies didn't really start until Jurassic Park, you know, and your reaction to like other 80s films we've watched, such as like a Buckaroo Banzai or something, and knowing that you're not even like the biggest like Ghostbusters guy in the world, I feel like sometimes I think you have like a little bit of an aversion to like 80s comedy, which I can understand even if I don't fully agree with it. And I also... I know deep in my heart that this isn't like the greatest movie in the world. So maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe it's my like you know, undying love for the character. Mm-hmm. I'm not blind to some of the issues with this movie, and I will bring them up. But yeah, I just can't help but like love it with every fiber of my being and like rewatch it almost every October because it does really fit into that sweet spot that I think you also know is like such an important sweet spot for me. And that is I'm a horror guy, but I really love like gateway horror. And I really love kind of like, as I said, like kind of more innocent, wholesome horror, especially around like the Halloween season. And I think Elvira, Mistress of the Dark it's like really campy, it's really goofy, it's really stupid. But again, purposefully stupid. Mm-hmm. And it's got that charm. It's got that charm of a movie, because this is what it is, except for the Sam Egan part, but with Cassandra Peterson and John Paragon, it's got that charm of when you get two people who have never written a movie before and tell them to write a movie, and they just like, they have a funny character or a funny idea, but they really don't know what a movie is. And they're just like, well, I don't know, let's just throw in like everything we think is kind of funny for ourselves. And I just really like that. I think the movie, it's obviously a very sloppy, ramshackle movie in a lot of ways, but the Elvira character is just so powerful. And this is what I'm going to keep kind of coming back to, is I think if you can just lock in on Cassandra Peterson and her strength as like a comedic performer, mm-hmm. I really think this movie deserves, obviously it's got a huge cult following, but I think it almost deserves even more attention than it gets just for her performance. Like just lock in on her, watch her facial expressions through the movie, watch the way she like delivers her one-liners. It really is like, it's probably a better performance than the movie deserves, but to me it elevates the movie.
Wait a sec. See that guy over there?
What, the lard bucket and the 10-gallon hat?
I got something to show you.
Sorry, left my magnifying glass at home. I can't stand Ellie little dogs. Boy, if my aunt wasn't dead, I'd kill her. Get my hands on that patty.
I'm gonna rip every single bleach blonde hair out of her scalp, gouge out her eyeballs, and use her head for a bowling ball. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most drop-dead gorgeous one of all? Oh, you're just saying that.
So yeah, obviously we'll have more to say as we go along, but yeah, not surprisingly, this is a fave of mine.
Yeah. As we know, you are a child of the 80s. And this is an 80s kid's gooner's dream.
It is, yeah.
I watched this for the first time a few days ago with my fiance. She pops in every once in a while to watch something with me. She wanted to watch this one with me. First and foremost, Cassandra Peterson, obviously you're right what you're saying there about her in general as a performer. She's giving a truly iconic, singularly her performance. You know, total commitment to the bit. Yes, Elvira is abrasive, but in that like total confidence, absolute way. You know what I mean? Like she's not like a bitch.
No.
Like, you know what I mean? Like somehow she straddles the line of being abrasive but not being annoying. It's pure charm and wit, which I said before. Like it shines every single moment she's on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And when she's gone, the movie's quite tedious. So that's where I would put it. I say, like, of course she's the star. Her humor is my kind of humor. So there's I'm all for that. This movie starts. I wrote this down. A lot of innuendo up front. And then I'm like, is she like sort of owning her own sexuality here?
Mm-hmm.
And then like the whole movie gets into like this dreamlike state. She talks to the camera a couple times, totally sets the tone. She washes her windshield with her boobs. Like, it's so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it good. Like, it's campy nonsense.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's tedious at times. Every time she's not on screen, I was like, okay, when's she coming back? I think the villain is really bad. I'm not into the villain. And the himbo love interest, I know what they're going for.
Yeah, I have stuff to say about that.
I think the problem with him is that he's just not as good as her. And who is? You know what I mean? So he kind of had an unwinnable task, you know, to kind of go toe-to-toe with Elvira's wit. Or you know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of... The love thing is not really working. She's doing all the heavy lifting, but again, you can't really fault him because I wouldn't be able to do it either. And I would say this, not having Tim Burton direct this, that fucking sucks. Because there's a surreal quality that is hinted at in the beginning, but then it becomes just like every other 80s comedy I've ever seen in my life. Like, looks-wise. You know, it's not as dynamic as it should or could be. And I think I wish it leaned more into that supernatural element that it does in like the back 20 minutes. It's a short movie, but I think I guess I wasn't prepared for the fish out of water, which I love. But I wanted more, I guess, witchy spookiness maybe, rather than like pop culture 80s references and that sort of thing. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So
yeah, totally. Yeah. Look, where I'm going to actually totally 100% agree with you, and this is what because I was trying this last time I watched it. I was trying to watch it with a slightly more critical eye than usual, right? Because I was like, well, I'm going to have this full talk about it. So you put
your pants on, and you're like, I'm going to watch this for real.
No, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But what I will absolutely agree with, and James Signorelli does a serviceable job, but that's what it is. It's a serviceable job. Yeah. And I agree that like even beyond the fact of like whether there's enough supernatural material or not, it's just not directed stylishly enough for what the character and the story deserves and needs. Like that, I absolutely agree with. I get it. Like we said, like why they brought him in is he's just one of those TV guys who can like kind of quickly get the job done, but you feel that watching the movie too. It's very much like I don't know, just plop the camera down and let them riff. And like thankfully when she's on screen, you have an amazing riffer, so that's great because like she's just so entertaining. But that's, I think, when you're saying like when she's not on screen and like when you're kind of like left with other characters, Tim Burton could have still made those scenes interesting, and he could have just had every scene pop with some kind of like stylish touch. And the movie is sorely missing that. I 100% agree with that. So like that's what like I said. I know it's not a perfect movie, and I can recognize, it's not the most amazingly directed movie. It's just kind of it feels workmanlike in its direction.
Yeah, and again, I loved how stacked the sexual innuendos and puns are. Like she's doing a phenomenal job, and you can tell that she's having an absolute blast doing it too. Even if I guess the poodle was a pain in the fucking ass. That's what I heard. The poodle was not behaving well, but you wouldn't know because I actually think the performance of the dog is like really good. So
apparently you're seeing like the only usable takes,
Oh, that's
the
funny.
dog was just like going crazy like all the time. But even left permanent scars on co-star Kurt Fuller. Bit his ankle at one point. Yeah, left permanent scars.
I guess I'll put it this way because I obviously liked it. I obviously liked it. Like how can you not like watching Elvira for 90% of her own movie? You know what I mean? And there's a joy to be had. I guess I just wish, it was a stronger debut.
Yeah.
For the mainstream theatrical audience, because it does, I think, unintentionally comes off as like just TV.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was made by NBC Studios. They got a TV guy to make it. It was even like I think they were looking at it more like almost like a pilot for her eventual sitcom. Like they were more interested in the TV aspect than maybe she was, or she thought this was the beginning of more of a movie franchise. I can't disagree with that, and I think I even think structurally, I said earlier that the movie is a sloppy, ramshackle movie, and you're absolutely right that on a structural level, what I do want to give it credit for. Not to cut myself off, I'm getting to the same point here, but I think it's very interesting that for her debut movie, they made the decision to kind of cement the Elvira character as like what the Elvira character was in reality at that point and in pop culture. Like starting the movie saying, Elvira's a horror hostess. She's a horror hostess on a network. She hosts bad horror movies. So I think that's kind of cool because it would have been easy to just say like, well, let's take the Elvira character and plug her into like other kinds of things, because that's the mode that was happening with like Ernest, right? Ernest isn't playing a commercial pitchman in his movies. He's like the town's like garbage man, or he's just like a handyman somewhere, But with Elvira, they're like, no, she's Elvira. People know she's a horror host, so we'll start it that way. But then this movie actually ultimately develops like an origin for the Elvira character, right? Like, where's the Elvira character come from? What is her backstory? Which establishes that she is like the supernatural witch type character. Yeah. The problem is, as you just alluded to, that all comes in like the last like half hour of the movie. The movie kind of forgets to get to that until the end. It really does. And I mean, I like the stuff in the town, and it's, especially too being a child of the 80s, I kind of always love. And it's sad how still relevant it is today. But the the kind of stereotypical like comedic conceit of conservative town versus like a rabble rouser or something.
Yeah, the Footloose syndrome.
And just poking fun at like conservatism, which this movie's obviously doing. Naming the town Falwell, Massachusetts, named after Jerry Falwell, a really prominent TV evangelist at the time. Right. And obviously this is the era of like the moral majority and satanic panic and Tipper Gore leading trying to get like bands their records pulled from stores because they're satanic lyrics. Mm-hmm. So like I'm down for that. I'm down for making fun of those people and exposing the hypocrisy behind them. We see them have like a town meeting where they all talk about how much they hate her and want her out of town, but really all the men just want to like sexually molest her, And
I know that's what Brittany was watching it with me, and we got to the bowling alley, and she was like, "Why is everybody a rapist?" Yeah. I'm like, well, I mean, this is obviously something that. Obviously, I know what it's going for, but then also playing this character for this many years at this point, like I'm sure Cassandra Peterson has seen her fair share of mouth breathers.
The opening scene is like a news station owner coming in and basically heavily insinuating that she has to sleep with him to keep her job.
Yeah,
right? And
there you go.
I'm guessing Cassandra Peterson has experienced that, and that's the thing about the movie too. Is you talk about like we didn't even get into, I mean, we obviously hinted at it and hit on it a little bit, but Elvira is like feminist icon. Mm-hmm. And I think what's great about the Elvira character is, as we said, she's very, very sex positive. She talks about sex all the time. As you said, she calls herself like man hungry and everything, but she's not a bimbo, and she's always in control of every situation. Right. You know, she sleeps with who she wants to sleep with. She hits on who she wants to hit on. And she's not just like presented, you know, she's not portrayed as like the stereotypical like 80s movie like slut or bimbo. No, she's a character who's completely in charge of her own sexuality, and that's why like the jokes like work as well as they do, because if she's willing to have fun with it, this is what I really like about the Elvira character and just this tone of film. There's like an innocence to the sexuality even because of how kind of like good-natured she is about it. And you know, every time plenty of like horrible men try to have their way with her, but she always gets the upper hand on them. And that's good to see too.
And I think that speaks to even the way that the adolescent cast like of characters treats her, right? Like this new generation that's you know, surviving this town looks to her in an innocent way. Yes, like they're obviously like horn dogs for her as well, but it's like that kid level horn dogness. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't come off like that piggish owner of the network, you know, like people just grabbing her tits, you know, it's the boys are just kind of hot and heavy for her, and it's that silly campiness which I like, and she leans into it. Like even the
she does.
when the kids like go up to her house and they're using, you know, like binoculars or whatever they're using, you know, try to catch her naked or whatever. And then she like realizes it and she comes out the door and she's got like her like green face paint on and her like cucumber eyes or whatever. And then like just tells them to like bug her off and slams the windowsill on their hands and they fall. And it's like a pratfall, you know, it doesn't come off gross because it is like just dumb kids.
Yeah, like it should be gross if you really think about it, but like
sure, but
80s comedies were like the era of peeping Tom humor, and this one, like you said, it's played so innocently, and she reacts to it like, you know, and they come back the next day, and she's still friendly with them. So,
totally. Yeah, and they do all this work for her. She basically puts them all to work to like remodel her.
Well, that's the thing
house
too, right?
And,
like, there's a scene earlier on when she first gets into town and her like car breaks down, and then the teenage boys come up to help her, and there's a split second where you're like, oh, Elvira's like flirting with like 16 and 17-year-old boys. You know, that's like it seems kind of weird for a moment until you realize that again, she's doing it because she knows she can get them then to push her car to like the mechanic's office, right? Like she's always in control. Like she knows what she looks like and she can use that to her advantage as well. Now, would the movie be better without the teenage characters? Perhaps. And they never really intended them to be in there and didn't want them. That was like something that the producers wanted added in. Mm-hmm. And they felt like that took time away from everything else. But this is the point I was trying to get to earlier. And sorry, I forgot to get to it. But now I'm glad we waited until we brought up the teenagers. Because that's the issue with this movie. Like you're saying, like it doesn't get to like the witchy stuff soon enough. It doesn't, because this is like kind of like 3 movies crammed into one, right? There's the whole supernatural story with her and her uncle and the book, which is probably the best part and what the movie should have focused on and paid attention to.
Yes.
But then there's the Elvira versus the conservative town, which could have been its own movie, you know? Mm-hmm. And then there's the Elvira empowers the young teenagers of the town too, you know? And it's like, and I guess that's connected to the one, but all 3 of these things are kind of like their own little drive. And it's trying to smash those all into like an under 90-minute movie. And you're like, yeah, can we just like focus on one of them? Like, honestly, Elvira going to a town where everyone's conservative could have been its own movie without the supernatural stuff, or the supernatural story could have been its own movie. Putting them both together didn't leave enough room for either of them to hit their full potential.
100%. It's got a lot. It's weird because it has so much plot, but it's not really engaging in the plot at all because it loses steam in all 3 of those areas. There's good stuff peppered in all that for the narrative, but you're so right that I wanted it to like focus and really dig in. And yeah, the last third was where I was like, man, I wish this was the movie. And especially when that like rubber monster comes out of the pot, I was like, fuck, this is the movie right here. And I wish we had more of that. I wish we had more spells. I wish we had more. She got to the cookbook and realized it was a spell book, like in the first act. Like, why not? And it's like you said, they're trying to cram way too much into an 85-minute movie. I don't want to say it's unfortunate because it's not like, you know, this movie has a cult following big time. And I'm not even saying it's bad. You know, like I think there's a lot to like here. It's very charming. It's very, very charming. And I could watch Cassandra Peterson as Elvira for a while. At least 7 to 10 minutes, for sure.
That's all you need? Come on. More like, be honest, Chris. 2 to 3 minutes.
2 to 3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's you're right. I mean, I don't think the movie's bad. I think like I said, I think for what the movie is, it's good. But I agree also at the same time, as much as I love it, as much as it's a favorite of mine, yeah, it's not quite as strong of a cinematic debut as you would hope for the character.
Totally.
And you can always see where there's like potential to go further. Like I said, there's not even there's no like sequence I would necessarily point to and be like, this is the one to take out. But it just still feels like, well, okay, if you're gonna leave that in, maybe that should be just the entire thrust of the movie, And like
you wanted more horny casserole. That's what you wanted.
It's funny you brought up the horny casserole. Let's talk about that scene. But before we get to that, just as another quick throwaway, because I think about my history of this movie, you might laugh at me for this. Maybe you'll make fun of me, but the pot monster you talked about, the monster she inadvertently cooks in the casserole, and it comes out of the pot and attacks her and Bob. When I saw this in the theater as a kid, I actually found that scary. I thought that monster was scary as a little kid.
It looks scary.
Yeah,
it's not a cute monster at all.
It's like a really good puppet. The moment's not really played for humor either, but I remember actually being scared in the theater of that. That's the only moment in the movie that did scare me. But like when you're a kid, like even in a dumb comedy like this, certain things like that. Like I remember seeing the Thriller video scared me when I was a kid too. Speaking of Thriller, so
yeah, I was scared by the baby Elvira.
that is terrifying for totally different reasons.
Yeah, you know what? So, listeners, there's a scene where they show the backstory of Elvira being dropped off at an orphanage, and it zooms in on the baby in the bassinet, and it looks like Elvira with the makeup and the beehive and just a little baby. And part of me was like, did they dabble with putting fake boobs on that baby?
Thank God they did not go that far. But even the makeup on the baby, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, it is totally ridiculous. I looked at it, I kind of burst out laughing, and like that weird, uncomfortable laugh. I look at Brittany, she looks up, and she just looked back at her phone. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know what to do.
Now, what did she do, and what did she think during the horny casserole scene? So let's talk about this.
That we laughed quite hard. I thought we the horny casserole. First of all, that's what she dubbed it. So that's not my joke. She called it that. The horny casserole scene is quite funny, especially when Chastity Pariah, an amazing character name, by the way.
And I would say, because you talked about how like the other characters aren't that great, I would say she's the exception.
Well, she's Edie McClurg.
Edie McClurg, yeah. So you're always happy to see Edie McClurg. And a groundling coming in. There's quite a few groundlings in this. Actually, I don't know if you clocked this or not, but the anchor woman that she has like the rivalry with in the first scene, that's Tress MacNeille, who is like a famous Simpsons voice performer. Oh. But she was also a groundling. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
But yeah. So, anyways, back to the horny casserole.
No, wait. When Chastity Pariah sits on that guy's face.
Yeah. So for those who haven't seen the movie, there's a scene where as you said, the very conservative, like moral majority, elders of the town are holding like a potluck picnic, essentially. And Elvira delivers like a casserole, which I'm not even sure what she thinks it's meant to do. Like she's used the spell book, but I'm not sure what she's going for. What she does not expect, though, is everyone who eats it gets very, very horny. So it turns into a montage of all these like elderly senior citizens having basically a group orgy. Yeah.
And it's I was like surprised how explicit it actually got. Like again, when she sits on that guy's face, I was like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that made the cut, if I'm being totally honest. When it leans really hard into that kind of stuff, like especially like the end, even with her Vegas show, leaning right into the horniness and the sexuality, it is quite funny. And it is, again, how did that make the edit, you know?
I think there is something very, very funny too for like a movie, you know, because like movies are supposed to be about character arcs and like the character journey, right? The hero's journey. And I think it's very, very funny that the culmination of this movie is that she gets to do her like boob tassel trick at her Vegas show, and it's just like the last like minute is literally just Elvira spinning her boobs around.
Yeah, you can't top that. You can't top that for a sequel, so it makes sense. It went out.
I find that very funny, but then also when you do learn Cassandra Peterson's backstory and knowing how she was this Vegas showgirl, and that's like a very important part of her life and a part she's still proud of. And it's like, oh, okay, this actually all comes together, right? She actually is showing off the skills that, you know, led to her becoming this like this figure. So it's kind of perfect. Yeah.
So I know there's a few 80s references in the movie too, like pop culture wise.
Flashdance, of course, which was referenced in everything then, yes.
It was. And I still get a kick out of when movie like comedies like this go full slapstick and they do all like the flips and the silly edits that it's obviously not her, but then she pops out. You know, I still, for whatever reason, I laugh. And I know it's stupid, but I laugh at that. And also Elvira-Rambo, by the way, that was the hottest she's been in the. She was in the movie, and I don't know what it says about me and my relationship with Sylvester Stallone, but she looked awesome with that when she came out. I thought that was really funny, and she looked great. And it cements itself in the '80s, but I guess, you know, that's SNL, right? Like that's, I guess, when you get SNL people making sketch comedy together, and then you get the Groundlings and you get them all together to make a movie like this. I guess you do get pop culture references sprinkled throughout. It's, you know, it's part of the DNA,
I know
right?
We're gonna do a bunch of these eventually, but this does feel like an SNL movie.
It does,
you know?
big time.
Like it does. I mean, like it feels like Elvira would be an SNL character, and this is her getting her first movie like that. And obviously, that's not quite the case, but pretty darn close. You know, she's a TV
gags,
character.
It's gags and one-liners.
Yeah. And like, we talked about like the raunchiness of that the orgy sequence, but there's like a lot of humor in this where I'm actually really surprised the movie skirted by with like the PG-13 or whatever.
Oh yeah,
'cause it's, I mean, like, one of the most infamous jokes in the movie, one of the most kind of often repeated and gift is when Bob is fixing up the theater marquee and he drops the letter on her. He says, "How's your head? I haven't had any complaints yet." You know, that's a great
risque.
joke, but also like risque.
Elvira, I'm sorry. Are you all right?
Yeah, I think so.
How's your head?
I haven't had any complaints yet.
When she's like fixing the marquee herself, and it looks like she's like, Chastity Pride comes out, and it looks like it says "How to fuck." Yeah, I love that. That's actually a good style joke too, because the way the camera like zooms in on it. But yeah, like you gotta love all that stuff. Like when she's in her Rambo costume and uses her boobs to push open the gate, like
and bust through the chain. Yeah. She knows what she's working with, right? And
she always did.
And that's why we keep saying it, but that's why they get away with it. It's because she's owning it. It's herself. She wrote the fucking movie. She is the character. You know, it's not 10 weird guys in a room that wrote this movie for her. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
to bring up DOA again, right? We talked about like why DOA like could have felt very exploitative, and why we thought, like, to us at least, why it didn't feel that way. And we said, like, you can sometimes tell the difference between a movie that is like made entirely by like gross men who are putting women like into positions, no pun intended, that they don't want to be. And then when you're dealing with like women who actually are very into it and are like kind of owning their own sexuality and their power. And obviously Cassandra Peterson as Elvira is the ultimate example of that, where she writes the material. I mean, some of it with Paragon, or a lot of it with Paragon, but I mean, she is the character, right? She is making the jokes. She knows how sexy she is. She knows how to like push that sexuality forward. But as we said, also undercut it with like the silliness and even the kind of the boneheadedness of Elvira too. Because she can be played as like playfully dumb at times as well. But yeah, she's in total control. And as we said, no man ever actually gets to take advantage of her. She always chooses like who her partner is. It's pretty perfect. And like, like that's what I said, like that's why there's an innocence to it. And I was talking to my wife about this after we watched it. I think this is actually something that's kind of missing from like this kind of like sex forward genre or movie. But there was like this definite era of like the late 80s and early 90s where you had like Rhonda Shear hosting USA Up All Night, speaking of like TV and horror and movie hosts.
Right.
And then like certain, not all of them, obviously there are very problematic sex comedies of the 80s, like obviously, right? But there's also like this other wave of them that were like, you could kind of like feel the power of like how the women actually were the main characters. You know, like, there's a big difference between a movie like say Porky's, which is about horny teenage boys spying on women and trying to, like, you know, go to the strip club and, you know, get laid no matter what. And then there's this other wave of, like, sex comedies at the time where, like, the women were the main characters and they're the ones who are trying to, like, come together as a group and, like, accomplish something. And I don't know, I always felt growing up like those were, like, kind of, like, oddly feminist in a way, even though they were filled with, like, nudity and, like, bad sex jokes, because they were showing the women in, like, positions of power and the ones who are always getting the upper hand on men. And right. I think Elvira, like, fits into that perfectly.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Now, can I can't let this go without, because you mentioned how you're not a huge fan of the villain.
Yeah, I was literally going to bring something up real quick about.
Yeah, well, go ahead. And well, I just wanted to say, like, yes, it's obviously disappointing. It's not Vincent Price, and it almost feels like, man, didn't they name him Vincent anyways? Like, talking about kicking the old man's pants, you know. Vincent Talbot. But I agree, he's, like, not the most memorable villain. I think he kind of holds his own well enough in scenes with Elvira, and, like, the few moments that ask him to be funny, I think he can be.
Right.
But I did want to point out the importance of this actor who plays Vincent Talbot, because it's William Morgan Shepard. And this is actually the great Chris Trev unifier, this guy. I don't know if you looked at his filmography, but did you know that William Morgan Shepard played Captain Archibald Witwicky in Transformers? In the flashbacks?
My God.
Yeah.
No sacrifice, no victory?
Yeah, that is him. But
shit.
Perhaps even more importantly, Klingon prison warden in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Wow. Okay, well, look at this. I take everything, I take it all back. I take it all back.
Kinda
that is wild.
You know, yeah.
Wow. Shia's uncle. What else was he in? He was Father Cullen in It's Always Sunny in one episode. Oh, he was on Doctor Who. There's another one for you. He's been in a lot of things.
He has been. He's the one who's working actor guy.
Hey, by the way, he was actually in Star Trek 2009 as well. Vulcan's science minister.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Yep.
Wow. JJ, you know? Always knew what he was doing. Okay, I'll say this about his makeup that progressively changes throughout, right? It's getting, like, more evil and more prosthetic and rubber on his face, right?
Yeah.
By the end, giving off mad Ivan Ooze vibes.
What is that odious stench? Smells like
teenagers.
Yeah.
All Agreed. I can think about. All I can think about. But yes. Anyway, that last half is I don't want to keep saying it, but the last, like, 20 minutes is pretty cool. It's smart to get him in, like, the Salem witch trial type of thing going on. We're in, you know, Massachusetts, massive two shits. And it's, like, clever that they're burning Elvira at the stake.
Yeah, like the Girl Scouts, making s'mores on the fire. Yeah,
that's the type of slapstick, like, Leslie Nielsen era shit that I just love.
One of my favorite jokes in the movie, and it's not even like it's not filmed amazingly well. I think it'd be even funnier if Signorelli did a better job directing it. But I get the idea of it. Is when she's battling her uncle and she's found out that her ring has, like, magical powers and she can kind of, like, shoot beams with it. And I love the moment where she throws her hand forward to try and throw a beam at him, and she just accidentally throws the ring to him. And it just lands on his finger. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that stuff. Again, the humor in this movie is, like, very much my sensibilities.
Yeah.
You know, the beginning
just
where
dumb.
Just dumb. Yeah, you know me.
Yeah.
With comedies, I like dumb fucking movies.
Yeah.
And there's a moment even in the beginning where I just thought this was fantastic, is when she goes to the gas station. And again, I mentioned she wipes her windshield with her boobs, but then she pours gas by accident on the ground, and then drives off. And this one guy, of course, lights a cigarette, and behind her, just the entire gas station explodes. And it's like this amazing shot because it is her in her car.
That's where the budget went. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Like, it's a. You know me. You mentioned Transformers. I love myself some explosions. And right then and there, I thought that was just so funny and looked great. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. And then, of course, the fish out of water stuff. I eat that shit up.
By the way, that guy, first of all, two things about that. The guy playing the gas station attendant, that was actually John Paragon, by the way.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And also, that character, he just died. That guy died. That guy fully died.
What?
Like, there's no two way. There's like no two. Like, ways
Oh, the
around
character.
It. Like,
for a second,
character,
I was like, wait, John Paragon just died? Like, what did you just?
Well, no, John Paragon has unfortunately passed away.
Oh, okay,
but no, that character, I just think it's like that's what I mean. Like, but that's like, I think you and I are on the same comedic wavelength where it's just funny because it's like if you think about the reality of that, it's like, oh, Elvira just like inadvertently killed that guy.
Yeah,
but. Kind of funny.
Yeah, but before the pre-credits.
Yeah.
No, it's a good little movie. I spoiled myself, and of course I went to your Letterboxd, where listeners, you can go to both of our Letterboxd. The links are in the bio of these episodes on your podcast app. But I did go snoop. Because of course I knew that you liked this movie, like of course,
right? Yeah.
But I looked, and you had a great. You just called it pure comfort food.
Yeah.
And I agreed with that. So I wrote that in my notes. I was gonna bring it up as my own thought, but I thought I'd give you credit. But
that's the kind of one thing about. I agree with that. Like we've been pretty fair, and I think I've agreed with your criticisms because they're obviously true.
Yeah.
The one nice thing about it being a sloppy movie and like not being that great and being as like kind of like all over the place as it is on the comfort food level. It is totally a movie you can put on and not fully pay attention to.
Oh,
you know, like it's a very easy movie to have on while you like carve a pumpkin for Halloween or while you or just do anything. And you can just kind of like zoom in on whenever Elvira is saying something funny and then kind of zone out when other shit's going on.
Yep.
So it's actually kind of perfect for that.
Another thing Brittany brought up is one of the main conflicts in the movie between one individual and Elvira is pointy boob versus round boob.
Yeah, and actually, that's one thing that, like, when you think about, like, things, like, that don't age well, and obviously, like, some just, like, whatever. Like, you and I don't typically care about this stuff, but I don't love that, like, there's, like, a little bit of, like, body-shaming humor with that character later, where it's revealed that she's actually flat-chested, and, like, whatever, but, like, the fact the movie is, like, ew, that's, like, such an 80s, like, comedy thing.
She's a liar.
Like, okay, yeah. I guess that's the part of it, right? She's a liar.
She's a liar. I looked at it less body-shaming, more that she's a fraud.
Yeah.
Right, which goes with the theme of this conservative town being a bunch of frauds.
Oh, I wanted to say one quick thing too. I know we're wrapping up, but because I mentioned, I said earlier that I would get back to like the Bob thing, because you're talking about it, like that character, as a romantic, equal, being kind of a dud. And boy, do I agree with that. But it's like I at the same time, over the years, I've kind of come around on the Bob character a little bit, even to the point where, like, you were kind of alluding to this too, where you said, like, I guess he didn't really have a shot, and you kind of understood what they're going for. Yeah. But my take on this was always, like, whenever I'd watch the movie, I'd always think, like, because I've actually also seen the unaired pilot that they do end up making for her sitcom, and that also has her falling for this, like, real, like, kind of, like, stud hunk guy, And I remember always thinking, like, I don't know, man, I feel like Elvira would be more into, like, a weirder guy, like a nerdier guy, Well, maybe a guy like Trevor Snyder.
I was about to say, I was like,
no, like it always, I always like,
prophecies
it seems more like Elvira would go for like a goth guy or something, right? And it took me a while to realize, like, I'm missing the point, and I'm missing the point of, like, especially of the 80s, where like the supposed, like, female ideal, especially in, like, the comedies of the 80s, were just these, like, statuesque bimbos, right?
Yeah,
like, and like, so if Elvira's going to flip that on a script, it obviously makes more sense for her to be attracted to himbos. And so it's like, totally. Oh, actually the Bob character does make sense. And it's not even like that guy is giving that bad of a performance, as you said. It's just that he's just kind of expected to be, like, he's just a boring character. He gets like one good bit of comedy at the very end, when he's in a neck brace and he gets to do like a little funny voice for a moment.
Yeah, that was fun.
but otherwise, yeah, it's just like, you do wish there was like maybe a more notable actor in that role that could like handle their own, with her. It's
funny you say that, because you read that Brad Pitt almost was in that role. And
not in that role. No, Brad Pitt was going to be like the main teenager. That was the thing.
Right. The main teenager. And then and Elvira was like, oh, he's way too hot to be even.
She literally said, in the casting call, she said, we can't have that guy play the teenager because Elvira would just be going for him instead of Bob. And they said, like, she actually wrote in her casting notes, like, just when Brad Pitt came in, she wrote, like, hubba hubba or something.
Oh, that's so funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, I mean, it's pretty clear that you're hot for the movie. I'm warm for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good sit. Certain, it's not it's not perfect, but it's not bad. It's kind of just I'm glad I watched it. Like I'm glad I finally, got my fair share of Elvira content. It was good. It was solid, and I'm glad I watched it with my fiance. She seemed to like it, and every once in a while I'm in for a gothic, campy, raunchy 80s comedy, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, of course, I want more. If there was a different timeline, there would have been more Elvira movies, and that the actual TV show. She absolutely deserves sequels and deserves. It's not like she has not had a career. So
no, that's the thing. It's like I know this was tough for her, and like you said, she definitely tried to get sequels going. She had already sold a script for the sequel, but that kind of Caracol Pictures went bankrupt, and that kind of got all tied up in red tape. She tried to do one called Elvira versus the Vampire Women, but that was going to be made with Roger Corman, and that fell apart after some kind of contract dispute with him.
Yeah.
I said she ended up NBC at least did allow her to they stayed true to their word and they made the sitcom pilot, but it just didn't. I don't even think it aired, and obviously it didn't go forward. You can watch it on YouTube. It's not that great, honestly. You do watch it and feel like, ooh, Elvira, a weekly sitcom is not the place for her. The jokes are still funny Elvira jokes, but the laugh track and stagey element of it, it's literally is like Elvira and her witch aunt living in the suburbs, and it's good God, how many episodes are you honestly going to get out of that?
Totally.
But obviously I'm disappointed more movies didn't happen. I just want to throw, we haven't done this in a while, can I throw out to you my idea for an Elvira movie from the 80s that I can't believe didn't happen, and I still think is one of humanity's great mistakes that they didn't let this happen?
Here's a movie where Elvira travels to Michigan.
No. Here's my pitch for what would have been the ultimate Elvira 80s movie, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Is that you start the movie and you see two twin girls born. So two fraternal twins are born, and for some reason they are separated at birth, and one is sent to live in Transylvania, and one is sent to live on a farm in Iowa. And then over the course of the movie, it's about these two sisters as adults now finding out or meeting each other, but having to basically swap lives. The one who was raised in Transylvania has to go work on the farm, and the one who works on the farm has to go to Transylvania. That's maybe the middle of the movie, and then the end of the movie is them finally meeting each other and coming together. Obviously, Elvira is the one who goes to Transylvania. The one who was sent to the farm, Dolly Parton. How did they not team up the two big-breasted feminist icons who both are so funny, so pure, and make jokes about their chest? How did they not appear in a movie together? That is insane to me.
That is wild, and that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that one. Every now and then you got a good one. Yeah.
Try.
And at this point, we were saying, that all that she's really been doing is voice work.
Well, we should say we do end up getting another Elvira movie much later. Because she ultimately does end up making Elvira's Haunted Hills in 2001. It takes forever for her to make another movie. Right. She's trying to get it through the studio system. It just won't happen. And eventually her and her then husband, they're divorced now, but it was her husband at the time. They just finance it themselves. They go to Romania and they make a movie called Elvira's Haunted Hills. I like it because I'm an Elvira guy. I wouldn't recommend you necessarily. This one really only works if you're not only an Elvira fan, but you're also really into the old Hammer and Roger Corman Poe movies, and you get what it's making fun of. It's so much more specific in its satire and parody.
Right.
And also it's just so cheap, So again, it's kind of, it's like those later Ernest films that were straight to video after Disney, had their run with him, where you're just oh, okay, this is too bad.
It's the Tekken 2 Kazuya's Revenge of Elvira films.
Yeah. So obviously not the sequel she ever intended to make to this. Yeah.
But she did a lot of voice work on the Scooby-Doo. With a couple of Return to Zombie Island and Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo.
Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo, I give a huge recommendation to.
Okay.
That's if people if you're into Scooby-Doo and you haven't seen that one, that is one of the best modern Scooby-Doo things they've done.
Well, she did have an incredible experience making those, so because of that, she has basically said if and when Elvira comes back, it will be animated. She loved doing that, and I guess it makes sense. I mean, you get a little up in age, you don't really want to.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. Actually, not. I mean, first of all, she looks amazing still.
She does look amazing.
Do you really want to?
She doesn't want to anymore. I think just because what a hassle it is to put all that on, the makeup and everything. But yeah, I mean, in her last years in costume, that was always like, not the joke, but what people would say about Elvira is like, you talked about the character being timeless, but she just seemed ageless.
Yes.
Because she was in her like, late 60s, early 70s, still putting on the Elvira costume and just looked incredible. And like, I have heard her say, and it's one of those things where you get it and you don't ever want to dismiss anyone's opinion, and especially their opinions about themselves. They're obviously entitled to that. But I have heard her say that she kind of thinks like now she's done with it because she's like, well, you do get to a certain point where you feel like you're probably too old to play this character. And I think she really has this idea in her head of like the Elvira character being locked in amber and like, hitting, like maybe she feels that she's not at a point where she can pull it off anymore. But I would honestly say, I think she has earned the right at this point to like, you could just, I would actually like to see like an older lady Elvira, right? And like, you can like just make the costume more modest and like throw like a gray streak like in the beehive. And I actually think it would be awesome. But if she doesn't want to do that, that's totally her prerogative. So more power to her either way.
I would hope audiences nowadays would get it.
Yeah.
More, what I'm trying to get at?
She's just so beloved that I think like everybody would be on board still, but it's hard when it's her own opinion, you can't dismiss it. So, I really do think it's just more that I honestly think it's just such a pain in the ass to do the makeup and get into the costume and everything. And she said she's created this, it's still an empire. It's still an icon. She owns it all. We didn't even tell the amazing story of that, about how she kind of got the full rights to the character back piecemeal over the years. Like every time her contract came up, like the network was like, okay, we want to re-sign. She's like, okay, I'll re-sign, but only if I get the merchandise rights this time. And they're like, okay. And then she's like, okay, this time I want the rights to like personal appearances. And then finally after like 5 contracts, they were like, oh shit, we've signed over like everything to her, So she's obviously, she obviously still makes a lot off the Elvira character.
Oh, definitely.
So she doesn't need to play it anymore. I get it.
Did you watch the Netflix and Chills with Dr. Elvira from 21?
I saw some clips of that. I watched, she had like a Shudder like special, like a Elvira anniversary special where she, hosted a couple movies again. But yeah, and then she, like, for a while there, she was like putting out music videos around Halloween every year. There's like a great one called My Two Big Pumpkins or whatever.
Still got
it. Guess what the joke is, but yeah. So yeah, I've definitely anytime she was still, I didn't watch the Goldbergs just because I didn't watch the Goldbergs.
Yeah,
but in general, anytime Elvira still popped up, like even in the 2000s, she brought back Movie Macabre. There was like a Hulu version where she showed full moon movies, like like Puppet Master and Doll Man and stuff like that, and I watched those. So yeah, I was always excited to see her back, and I even watched. I don't know if you heard about this, but they had a reality show called The Search for the Next Elvira, which was this brief moment where she actually had this idea to franchise the Elvira character, where she was like, well, yeah, I figured, I could have like Elvira proteges and like I can be the main Elvira, but I can have other Elviras and they can go to like parades and like, appear on TV. And this woman named April Wallen won it. And for like 1 year, she was the next Elvira, and she would go to different public appearances. And it just only lasted the 1 year. And then Elvira said that like, she's like, we didn't keep it going because no one really wanted to hire her. They just really they were like, that's not the real Elvira, So
totally
interesting idea, but it didn't quite work. Yeah.
I vaguely remember that. Vaguely. What I do remember when she popped up on this show that I used to absolutely love. I wonder if you watched it too. It was a reality show with prosthetics and makeup. It was called Face Off. Did you watch that?
Oh, I remember that show. Yeah, I didn't watch it regularly, but I certainly remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. Face Off, I loved. That was such a good show. I think you can maybe find it somewhere streaming. It only lasted, I think, a couple of years, but it's like a horror, science fiction makeup prosthetic competition. And they usually had guest judges, and I just checked her IMDb, and I completely forgot that she did a guest judge appearance as Elvira, not as Cassandra Peterson. So very cool. Yeah, Face Off. What a great show.
Yeah.
And then I guess she hates Ariana Grande.
Yeah, one of the more recent news stories about her.
Yeah, I'll just say briefly. This was so silly because. Cassandra Peterson, Elvira, came back into our cultural ether in October, I think, of 2024. Ariana Grande brought her like family to see an Elvira show, and then she asked for like a bunch of tickets, and free tickets, of course, because the super rich don't need Anyways, doesn't matter. And then they all came backstage, and Elvira took a bunch of pictures with her entire family. And then Ariana just refused to take a picture with her and said, nah, I don't really do that. So like Cassandra said this at like a convention or something, and then it actually got to Ariana Grande where she had to post on Instagram saying like, oh, I was having an anxiety attack and yada yada, whatever, she was being a diva. That's what she was being.
Yeah. Wow, what a surprise that Ariana Grande, the person who apparently had people who hired someone to carry her around in the past, like a baby.
I know.
Would be a diva.
Yeah. And it goes to show you the difference. I guess that's the reason why I'm bringing it up. It goes to show you the difference between a cultural female superstar, as in Ariana Grande, and then this cultural female icon, as in Elvira. And just, I guess, the difference in how they are, with their fans or with the normies, quote unquote, or even with other stars.
I think it also shows you like kind of that endearing, like I said, when I talked about Elvira just being so beloved, like that it shows the endearing power of that too, where like she just had to go online and briefly say like, oh, Ariana Grande kind of was like kind of crappy to me. And like the world was like, someone was mean to Elvira. And like Ariana Grande had to put out like an apology about it,
Totally.
Like, how dare you offend Elvira, right? Like
that's
power.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like an offhanded comment.
Yeah.
During the Wicked tour as well, by the way. Like the press tour. Crazy. Okay. I guess you liked the movie. So there you go.
It's all right.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, Summer Surprise.
I've owned it on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. It's all right. Yeah.
Right. Is there a 4K?
There is a 4K, but I still haven't made the transition to 4K. If I do, I'll probably get it. Yeah, so.
Nice. Okay, Summer Surprise rolls on. Our favorite time of the year.
It'd be great if we could just call it right here, but...
Well, we got a couple more to go, and just to tell the listeners, next episode is Beautiful Creatures from 2013. So we're looking at a YA adaptation. After that, I Spy from 2002, then the House with a Clock in Its Walls from 2018, and then wrapping up Summer Surprise, end of August, the Garbage Pail Kids movie from 1987. So,
what if the big surprise of this, like the big summer surprise, was that you find out I'm as into Beautiful Creatures as I am into Elvira, Mistress of the Dark?
I fear that's going to be the case when we hit that Garbage Pail Kids movie.
My lips are sealed. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's it. We gotta get out of here.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta get out of here. Follow us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2 FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Join the tribe. Hit that subscribe. And...
Rate
and review, whatever you do. I say it, and I just hope it happens. You got a good pun to go off on? What do you want?
I was just going to finish with her sign off, Unpleasant Dreams. It's funny, when I was watching the movie, I did think, I was like, well, I don't know if Chris is going to like this, but then the scene came where she's, washing the car, and, her boobs are on the windshield, and I was like, but he's not going to hate this. That's for sure. He's not going to be mad he watched this movie.
No, right away, I was like, right away, I think that's when I started to make my first notes.